Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to install a generator safety interlock switch as well as an inlet box. What these two things will do is allow you to connect your generator to your house safely to power your air conditioner, refrigerator, what have you, depending on the size of your generator. So let's get into it. To give you a better look at everything, I'm going to take that screw out, I'm going to remove this cover, I'm going to take that screw out, I'm going to remove that cover, and that'll expose all the wiring so I can better explain everything. So here's the wiring, here's the plug. I'm going to explain to you how I came up with needing a 30 amp breaker, because this is a 30 amp breaker. It'll be different for you. I just want to explain how I came up with that so you can do the same for yourself and figure it out. This also matters with the wire size. It also matters with the plug type, okay? The generator I have is 6,500 running watts. To figure out the current, because that's how you decide on your wire size and breaker, as well as the plug, is the current. So since my generator runs at 6,500 watts, you would take that wattage and divide it by your voltage. 6,500 divided by 220 is right at 30 amps. The reason I said 220 is because that's what, in the US at least, that's what our incoming power is. Okay, so it's either 30 amps at 220 volt or 60 amps at 110 volts. So that's how I came up with that. So they gave me my 30 amp breaker. Well, connected to the breaker is the wire. I need to know the correct size wire. You don't want to use too small a wire because it'll get hot, you'll get resistance, then it'll get hotter, and it could potentially catch on fire. You don't want that to happen, so you want to make sure you use the right size wire. You notice there's copper wire, there's aluminum wire, okay? You can use either, but with aluminum wire, there are a few more things to look out for, such as the connector. All connectors are not aluminum and copper rated. You need to make sure your connectors are aluminum and copper rated if you're going to use one or the other. Just about all connectors are copper rated. Another thing you got to look out for is aluminum, for its size, is not rated the same power as copper is. To make sense of that, like 10 gauge copper, you would use 8 gauge aluminum. 30 amps is good for 10 gauge at certain runs. And again, you don't need to listen to my exact numbers. You need to figure this stuff out on your own. I'm just explaining my situation. 30 amps, 10 gauge wire is good for, unless you're doing like an extremely long run where you'll have voltage drops and then you need to step down a gauge, 8 gauge, 6 gauge, whatever it is. All I had was 8 gauge wire, so that's what I used. Another thing you need to look out for is your connector. Again, with the aluminum and copper, you want to make sure your connector is rated for the type of wire you're putting in. The reason that's important is because aluminum will oxidize. Some connectors are not rated for that. They have compounds you can put on aluminum wire to keep it from oxidizing, but it's just a couple of things to look out for. What I was getting at is with the wire size and the connector, the reason that matters is this connector, the maximum size wire you can put in it is 8 gauge. So 10 gauge is good for 30 amps. All I had was 8 gauge, so that's what I used. Okay. And also, this is a 30 amp plug. They have 50 amp plugs, and there are multiple different plugs. You just need to make sure your plug is good for that amount of current. That's a 30 amp plug. You also need to make sure that your plug matches the wire that you have, and the wire plug matches the generator that you have, because that would be a horrible situation to be in when you buy the wrong cable or the wrong plug that doesn't match your generator plug. Then you got a power outage and you can't even connect it. That's, you know, kind of how I figured out with the breaker and the wire and the connector and all. When you're working on this, you want to make sure that if you don't feel comfortable working around electricity, you want to make sure your power is off. You can get this voltage tick. They're pretty cheap. It doesn't tell you an exact number, but it does tell you that's off, that's on, that's on. Now, if I were to flip this off, everything's supposed to be off. That means that this wouldn't be beeping if I flip this off. But you never need to just assume things, because you can get shocked You can get hurt really bad. It'd just be a bad day. This doesn't tell you exact voltage, but it tells you there is a voltage and that you need to be careful. As I said, if you turn this off, the power could still be on if there was a fault in that. Very unlikely, but it could happen. So always verify that everything's off before you start working on something. To kind of decide, you know, what size generator I needed and what I could run, what I did was use a current clamp. As you can see, the current is at 27.5 amps. How this works is you need to get a current clamp if you want to do this. You can't just look at like amperage ratings on your equipment and figure it out like that. But since I had it, I'll just show you. You want to make sure it's set on amperage AC. If you put it on DC, you're gonna be reading 0. Okay, I don't know why it turned off, but it did just now. But anyways, 27 amps. That is with 2 air conditioners running. That is with our water heater running. The dishwasher's running right now. The pool pump's running. Everything in the house is running full capacity. And it's normally, this number is normally like 10 to 12 amps. Obviously, my 30 amp generator is not going to run this. If it's not obvious to you, I'll explain. If everything's running at 30 amps, okay, that's its running current. Motors, compressors, heating elements, things like that have like an inrush current. When you turn something on, it's got to get started. Look at that, 35 amps is what we just jumped to. Okay. Anyways, back to what I was saying. When you turn something on, it's got to get started, which requires more power than its running current. Okay, like a motor just sitting there. When you turn it on, you'll hear it, that hum. And that's it using a lot of extra power to get up to speed. Once it gets up to speed, it kind of ramps down. Think about it like your car. You got to give your car more gas to get up to speed than you do when you're at speed. I hope that makes sense to you. So that's where when you see a generator, it has like a running watts and a starting watts. And that's what it's talking about, starting power. But anyways, this is like with everything in the house running. If our power's out, I'm not going to have all this stuff running. I want my refrigerator running. I want my freezer running. I would like to have hot water if it's shower time. If not, I'll just turn that off. And I would like to have air conditioner. Okay, you know, especially if it's hot. Luckily, we have gas fireplace, so I don't have to worry about the heat too much. Heat uses a lot of power. That's another story. You definitely want a huge generator if you're going to be running heat, because heat takes a lot of power. And that's something you can literally go look on your equipment, like your heat pump or your heat strips, whatever you have. And it'll tell you like the max current that the thing will draw, and you can kind of figure stuff out from there. But I chose that generator because it doesn't drink gas. It'll run my air conditioner or my water heater. I can cook food if I need to. We got lights and internet. That's all I really care about. In an emergency situation, I'm not going to be running my entire house. I'm going to be trying to run as little as possible to conserve gas. I just wanted to show, my heat pump just turned off and you saw how much power dropped. It normally runs at around 10 to 12 amps. You know, normally we don't run the dishwasher. I just wanted to show you kind of like worst case what you need to be looking for. And this side might be drawing more or less than the other side, so you need to check both legs. See, that side that I showed you was pulling more power. That's 25 amps, 28 amps. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys that, just to show you the expectation when you have a generator. You need to either properly size it or expect to cut back a lot. And you're probably wondering, well, how do I cut back a lot? You have a sub panel somewhere. This is a main. This is my main panel for my house. I have a sub panel inside. It's got like 20, 30 breakers in it. And you can flip off what you not want to use. As a matter of fact, when you're starting your generator, you need to flip the stuff off anyway, because your generator is not going to start if it's trying to run your whole house, and it doesn't even have the capacity for that anyways. But that's just something to kind of look for. I just wanted to explain that to you. Now I'll get into the box that I used and the connector and the wire and all that stuff. And I have less than $100 in this. I'm going to make another video. My parents want me to do this for them because my dad almost killed him and my mom with carbon monoxide. He was trying to warm his generator up when there was ice on the ground, and he left it in his garage. He should have known better. He does know better, but he did it anyway because he didn't think he was doing that long. Long story short, ran his generator in their garage. They both got really sick just so they could have a little bit of heat. So I'm going to do this for them, but it's going to be a different video because on mine I didn't really run any wire. I just ran that short little section. On theirs I'm going to run about 70 feet of wire, and I'm going to have to go through their foundation and put the box on the outside of that, so I can show you guys how to go through that as well if you're interested. It costs a little bit more money because wire's not cheap, but if you're interested, I'll show you. Like I said, this was less than $100, so you can get into this cheap, minus the generator, of course. Generators are not cheap either, but let's get into the box and everything. So this is the box that I used. It's a little bit more expensive than some of the others you'll see, but there's a good reason for that. It's a lot better quality. I got this one on Amazon, and I'll link this one. This is a 30 amp one as well as the 50 amp one. The 50 amp one's the one that my parents got, and they're literally the same. They just have different plugs. Really good quality. Cheaper ones I was looking at, because I was gonna buy a cheaper one because I like to save money where I can, but they got a lot of bad reviews, such as like the paint chipping and falling off after 2 or 3 years, and the connector not being big enough, or the connector stripping out. It's just, I don't know, with stuff like this you need to get good quality because it's kind of important, especially with something you're hooking electricity up to. But I like this one. It's just solid built. It's got a connector on the top. I ended up not using the connector like I thought. In my mind I was going to drill 4 holes and connect it to the panel like that, but I ended up drilling a hole there and putting a 1/2 inch, this is 1/2 inch fitting right here. I used a 1/2 inch fitting. Okay, and then I just did the knockout in the panel. All you need is a screwdriver for that. Pop that out, you just screw it together there, screw it together there, and it's got 4 screws in it. I think you can see the screws, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it mounts to the siding, so this thing's mounted really secure. Another reason I like it is because the connector's not on the front. You know, you got that big cable plugged into it. It just seems like a lot of stress on it right there. The connector's built into the bottom, so you can just plug it up like that. Gravity doesn't really take a toll on your cable, and it makes more sense because rain comes from the top. You don't want rain beating into your connector. Rain can't really get into it on the bottom like that, so I picked that because I liked it a lot better. Like I said, I'll link this one, the 30 amp one, and the 50 amp one in the description. For this, all I used, I needed to get 4 screws because it didn't come with those mounting screws, and I needed to get 2 of these connectors, 2 of those nuts, and I had to get a piece of 1/2 inch pipe. There is a piece of 1/2 inch pipe in between these 2 connectors. It's like maybe that long or something. So you'll need 4 screws to mount this. You'll need 2 of these connectors and 2 of those nuts, which is less than $1. You'll need a screwdriver or something to knock. See how that's set up where you can just knock it out? That was that. So I just knocked it out with a screwdriver. The reason I'm talking like this is because some people they've never had experience with this, so don't get mad at me if I'm going too slow. I'm just trying to explain everything that I had to do. You'll also need some wire. This one does come with wire, but I didn't use it because it comes with just enough to go out the top of the box. Reason for that is they expect you to use wire nuts so that you can just run a wire to here and wire nut that wire to that wire, but I don't really like using wire nuts if I don't have to, so I just took those out. And I already had the wire, but if you did have to buy the wire, I mean, you won't need but maybe 2 feet or something, 3 feet maybe. So got $50 in the box, about $1 in these connectors and pipe, and you'd probably spend 20 bucks on the wire, but I didn't have to spend that, so I got 50 bucks in it. You'd have 70 if you bought the wire, and then you're gonna need obviously a Phillips head screwdriver for these terminals. You're gonna need some wire strippers to strip that wire and cut it. You're gonna need a breaker. You're gonna need a straight head screwdriver or a square drive. If you have one or the other, square drive is a lot easier, it's less prone to stripping, but you're gonna need a breaker, whatever size you need. My breaker in my case was 30 bucks. So if you had to buy the wire, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And then you'll need the interlock kit. But like I said, I got 70 bucks in this. Can't really beat that, especially if you had to pay an electrician to come and do this. It'd probably charge you $400 or $500. So I think I covered the only tools I'll need. Obviously you'll need a drill to or some kind of driver to drive the screws into your house. And I use the screws with the washers on them for water. I mean, this thing's not 100% waterproof anyway, but it's rainproof. Hope that covered everything there. I'll go on to what you need next for the actual interlock kit. Almost forgot to mention, the pipe that you use needs to be the gray pipe in the electrical section. You don't want to use the white pipe meant for plumbing. Reason for that is the gray pipe is UV resistant. The white pipe, after 2 or 3 years of being out in the sunlight, will get brittle and it'll start to crack if somebody hits it, or if you're using like a string trimmer or something, it'll break. And you shouldn't be string trimming up here. I'm just saying, like, if you had to run a piece of pipe, you just want to make sure it's gray, UV resistant, electrical. Also, you want to make sure that you get the right size. Okay. I got 3 8-gauge wires, and I believe a 12-gauge ground. I think it's a 12-gauge ground. Anyways, those 3 8-gauge wires and 12-gauge ground is, you're perfect for that. I wouldn't go any bigger though. So you need to make sure I definitely wouldn't try to do any 90s with 1/2 inch. I would go up to 3/4. If you use bigger wire, you need to go up to like 1. That's just something for you to figure out and something for you to look for. And what I mean by 90s, if you were going down and going into the wall, you could not get those wires through a 90-degree fitting. I used 1/2 inch because it was small and I already had the stuff in my shop, so that's what I went with. If I was doing 90s, I would have went 3/4. 3/4, I can't stress that enough, because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to push wire or pull wire through a really tight pipe, and it's just not a good situation to be in. So now let's move on to the interlock. So this is the panel that you saw earlier. This is the interlock kit. It came with these 2 pieces of metal, came with these 3 screws, came with the stickers, the NEC code showing that this is legal, shows the generator startup procedure, and a little warning label. It also came with a label that you can stick on a transformer if you have one nearby, to let the utility workers know that there is a generator on site and it is running, and to let them know that hopefully you got this connected safely. I mean, they're still supposed to check power, but it'll just give them an idea and as a reminder to double check everything. So to put this in, oh yeah, this also came with a drill bit too, which is kind of nice. I have a million drill bits, so I didn't really need it, but if you don't, it's nice to have. And it's actually sharp. Some of them are not. It was actually straight, believe it or not. So you literally see how this first piece is flush there and flush right there. You just lay this piece on there, mark the 3 holes with a marker, and you drill it out. That's pretty much all there is to that. You can see on the back side, those are the 3 holes that I drilled. You run the Phillips head screws through. You run your nut. These nuts have like standoffs on them so that this can slide no matter how tight you get it. So you tighten your nuts up. I did use blue Loctite on these 3. I don't foresee this ever coming loose, but you can never have enough insurance with something like that, because you don't want a screw falling into your breaker. One thing to look out with these, they have a bunch of different models. They have them for square D, they have them for GE, they have them different lengths, different measurements, but luckily all the generator kits that you look at will tell you the brand and what the measurement is from this breaker to here. You also want to look at if you got a full panel, or if you got full up here, you might need to slide a breaker down or something to get this to fit. It'll also let you know if the interlock needs to be installed on the left side or right side. When I was saying GE and square D, it also reminded me to remind you to make sure when you buy a breaker to get the right kind. This is a GE breaker. They have square D breakers. They have the little double deal breakers. It's got like 2 breakers in one, all that. You just have to make sure you get the correct. See how those are connected right there with the little blades and the little thing that it latches on the back. You got to make sure you get the right breaker. Easy way to do that is to just look at what you've got and buy the right rating. So that's everything there. When you're installing the panel back on, you want to make sure this is off, this is on, or however you need it to be. And make sure that you have your actual interlock slid in the correct orientation so that it'll pop in place. You put your screw and then you'll be done. I hope you guys got something out of this. As I said before, if you're gonna have a situation where you're gonna need to run wires, In a week or two, I'm going to be making another video of me running the wires for my parents, because their generator is not going to be next to the box because of the location. They're afraid that someone might try to steal their generators, so they're going to have to run some wires. And I'll show you how to connect everything and run the wires and all this. So stay tuned for that. Just as well, I'm going to be pouring a concrete pad for my generator to go right here, as well as theirs. So you can check that out as well if you're interested. Hope you guys got something from it. If you have any questions, comment. I normally try to get back in a couple of days. Hope you liked it. Like, subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.